Well, hello. Look at this. Look what
Well,
we
hello.
have here tonight. Welcome back. I'll tell you, welcome back to your favorite stream, or at least the one I'm on. Let's see. This is, of course, John C. Wright, but today we have a special guest, and that's Mrs. Lamplighter Wright, who is also a fantasy author, and they are
Just Mrs. Wright.
Mrs.
She
Wright.
does not have a hyphenated name like some modern person.
You can either call me Lamplighter or Mrs. Wright.
She writes under her maiden name of L. Jagi Lamplighter.
Okay, and she is prolific as her husband. I see.
I am more prolific by 2 books, but
You have 30 and I have 10.
So yeah, how many books do you have between you? Not that anybody's counting.
I think we have about 40 between us. Don has about 30 altogether, and I have about 10.
Can you get up a little closer to the mic?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you can snuggle up to your husband. How long you've been married?
It will be 35 years at the end of June.
Congratulations. Yeah, you're.
Are we not coming through the my microphone?
You sound good. She's kind of cutting in and out a little bit, so she can get as close to the mic as
that's not it. My mic is not being fed in. Is not properly being fed into the broadcast.
Oh, really? I don't know. Let's see. Let's ask the
Yes.
Let's ask the streamers. Hey, let's ask my chat, which we do usually have to intro. We have to observe the formalities and say hello to who's here. So let's do that, and then we can ask them if you can be properly heard. So let's see. We have
I just changed my mic. So
okay, can you hear me now?
Oh, that's better. That's better.
Excellent. Good.
Telka, Yellow, Orange, Red, who is also a writer and helped me edit my last book. And there's AJ, who is a big supporter who I've met and is also a big supporter of my book career. Let's see. We've got Lily is here. And let's see. Lily D. Robertson, good to see you. All Yellow, Orange, Red is very excited. She's a writer and is very MLS, God of Law. Hey. And let's see. So that looks like our chatters for today. We have, so just to begin again, we have 2 excellent authors, and both are in the fantasy genre. I know Mr. Wright is a fantasy sci-fi. Is Mrs. Wright just fantasy, or do you also do sci-fi?
I think I've written 2 science fiction stories, short stories that appear out there somewhere. I also have a book on how to write. So I have a nonfiction book. It's not really available at the moment except on Substack, but it will be sooner or later again.
Well, and can I make a kind thank you to you, because you and Mr. and Mrs. Wrights gave me a little audio course of how to write.
Yeah, that's it.
And it's really helped me actually quite a bit in I'm trying to write a fantasy novel. And of course, so there's selfish reasons, but I also want to promote the Wright family's writing careers. And we have we've talked Catholicism in depth over and over, probably so that people are sick of us talking about Catholicism. And that's not going to separate. That's not going to not be part of us. But I thought, given who you are as prolific and excellent writers, that you could give us some tips and some understanding on how you both write fantasy novels, because you have many, many books to your name, and there's a lot to it. I'm a nonfiction writer, and I think that fiction is harder because you have to develop all these magic systems and develop the characters and loops. So, I mean, I don't even know. Where can you begin? You want to just introduce yourselves and tell us how do we start?
Introduce myself. My name's John C. Wright. I have been writing my entire life. I finished my first short story, Cosmic Messenger, at age 12. It was terrible. I finished my first short novel, Agent of Nesks, at 13. It was terrible. I continued writing continuously until age, when did I sell my first story?
Oh, 2001?
2001.
That's when it came out, so I'm not sure.
Well, 2001, and I was born.
That's when it came out.
I was born in the year 50 AD, so
you were actually
that would have been
40.
I was 1,579 at that time. Are you gonna listen to her? Or you listen to? I mean, who are you gonna believe? I was 900 years old at that time.
This is the source of the muse. You see,
And
just-
I was 1,900. I was 1,1690 in Mercury years. Mercury only has an 88-day year, and it rotates. It rotates once every half orbit. It doesn't have months because there's no moon on Mercury. So I'm not used to your Earth time yet.
Yes, all right. Well,
It also seems very cold to me here on this.
this one. Well, it depends on which side of Mercury, or if you're on the
No, that's a
side.
myth. That is
Really?
a myth. There is no night side of Mercury. I was shocked to find out Mercury actually rotates, but it rotates once every 6 months, so that for an observer before modern telescopes, you could not tell it was rotating, because half the time when you looked at it, you would get the same. You would get the same surface.
So it all gets cooked by the sun at some point.
Yes.
Okay, well done.
Though with no atmosphere to retain heat for half the orbit for 44 days, it's it's
Where else are you going to get this kind of trivia? Where
any high school textbook on astronomy?
Theoretically, there could be a spot on Mercury that was of the correct temperature that you could stand there, and then you could move slowly over 6 months and just go all the way around.
If you're holding your breath and not
Right, yeah,
exploding
that-
from explosive decompression,
What if you
and
not
dying
really,
from the intense radiation from the sun.
what if you drill down with some sort of drilling mole machine into the pole that is the pole? Therefore, you would have some access there and could make it into a planet.
Mole machine. Now you're just making stuff up. So, but to get back to the topic of how do you make stuff up, I start with certain images or striking visual ideas. I then try to tie them together to give some logical structure as to why the one picture is going to lead to the other picture. Then I sit down with a blank piece of paper. I start at the beginning. I put my name on the top. I write the story. I come to the end. I write towards the end, and I send it off without revising it to the editor, and I sell it immediately. That's the way I write. Everyone else on Earth,
he was kidding, but he's not.
everyone else on Earth uses now. No, I am kidding. I've used outlines sometimes, and I don't use outlines other times.
But it's
I use outlines when it's useful, and I do not use outlines when it's not useful.
Okay. Let's see. I want to hear from Mrs. Wright. I want a fact check here.
John will sit down, he'll think, he'll write, he'll get to the middle of something, and he'll spend a day or a month or a year complaining and not writing.
Not true.
And then he sits down.
I never.
Wait a second. Don't interrupt your wife.
And then he sits down and he writes
Complaining.
the rest of it, and he never revises and he never looks back. And so when we were the first years of our writing career, things like this used to happen. We'd find an ad for an anthology he wanted to submit to because he liked the subject, and it would say 10,000 words. And back then, I write at night. He writes during the day now, but back then it was the other way around. He used to write at night. So I would be heading up to bed, and he would say, "Okay, I'm at 15,000 words. I just need to get it down to 10." And I'd come down in the morning. He'd say, "I'm at 17,000 words."
Oh, yeah, it goes the other way.
And then he'd sell it to the people at 22,000. I don't think, I think one time somebody turned a story of his down for being too long.
Okay,
The rest of the times, if they bought it, if he submitted it, they didn't care about the length. They'd take it at twice as long. It's crazy.
Are there now? Do you utilize an editor, or are you your own editor?
He didn't. No, he just wrote it. Sent it off.
What about now? What about now, though?
I do rewrite from time to time at an editor's suggestion. Robert Heinlein wrote a series of 6 or 7 points as to how to be a writer. And his first point, which is often misunderstood, is never rewrite except at an editor's suggestion. What he meant was that never rewrite your final copy because you don't want to endlessly self-guess yourself. Now, his advice is the worst possible advice for someone who outlines as he writes. Okay.
See,
everyone outlines. Some people outline in their heads before they sit down. Other people outlines on paper. Some people who write organically outline during the writing process itself, and then they have to go back and rewrite. So better advice than Heinlein's is to say, rewrite until you're done rewriting, you say. But much of it depends on what your creative process is, whether you do it in your head or you do it on paper.
So I'm the opposite of John. I think I've rewritten one book 14 times. I
Wow.
submitted my first book in 1998. And by the time the editor bought it in 2005 or 2006, I had rewritten it entirely 6 times.
Wow.
So we came at it from the opposite sides. Nowadays, John does have me edit some things. And nowadays, I don't do as much rewriting because I've gotten better at it. So I maybe rewrite once.
So now,
but I actually do, like, my first draft is a lot of people say they don't like editing. I'm the opposite. I don't like having to get the ideas down there the first time. It's when I'm writing the second draft and I get to manipulate the ideas and get to really bring them out that I'm happy. So we work the exact opposite ways.
Interesting. Well, aren't there different types of writers, ones that are planners and outliners, and there's ones that are inspired writers? It sounds to me like John is more the inspired writer, and then maybe you're more the planner.
No,
there are different types of stories, and some writers naturally gravitate toward the stories you plan out, as opposed to the ones you write organically. Some writers only stick to one type of story as opposed to that type of story, but it actually differs based on the needs of the drama.
I disagree entirely with that.
Okay, well, let's hear the disagreement. Let's hear.
I teach writing, and so I can tell you the following: some authors can outline. This means they get a good idea and they can bring their creativity to that idea in such a way that not only do they have an outline, but when they sit down to write it, they still have good ideas. I have known a number of writers who started books I was really enjoying reading the first few chapters of, and then they wrote an outline and they never wrote again. That happened to me back in the early 90s. I had like 16 chapters. I wrote an outline. I never wrote a word for several years on that work. And somebody said to me, actually 3 different friends asked me about it. I had to go tear up the outline from where I had left off.
Because sometimes the outline kills your creativity.
Right. Because the process of making it up was what was making it interesting to me.
Right. Okay.
So what I say to my students is, if you can outline and keep going, do. It's a benefit. But if you try and you stop writing, tear up your outline and go back.
So I went to a writing conference class type thing, and it was full of hard lefty people who I was the unwelcome Christian in the group. All right. But it was very discouraging. However, one of the things I did walk away from is that they were looking for structure. The agents were looking for structure, and there's this like save the cat type thing, idea where you have these beats and you hit certain beats and certain. And so I took that away, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to force feed my story that I have here. It's about 45,000 words at this point, and I'm kind of stopped. And I'm like, maybe go back and hit those beats at the certain times. I mean, what do you go from an outline? Do you have a story?
What are you talking about with beats and cats?
I know what he's talking about, but you haven't even read that stuff.
No.
I'll explain it to you later. It's too complicated to explain now.
Okay.
Let me say one thing on the previous topic, and then I'll address that. I took one of my favorite writing teachers is Donald Moss. He was an agent, may still be an agent. He sat down once. He said, I'm going to read 100 of the best-selling breakout novels. He defined a breakout novel as a novel nobody put a lot of advertising into. They didn't expect it to be big, but it was. He said,
and it was not your first work. It was someone who had been small.
Work.
Oh, okay.
It was either a first work or someone who had been hitting 5,000 copies regularly and suddenly hit 20,000.
Yeah, okay.
So it was breaking out of where they'd been. And he came up, said, I want to see if they're better than what's over the transom coming to me as an agent. And he said they were better. And he wrote this book called Writing the Breakout Novel. And then he has a class. You can get a workbook about it. And a couple of the things in my writing class come from him. And I give him credit where I borrowed from him. I took a class with him once, and he said there are organic writers and there's outliners. And he said they both write good books. I, as the agent, can't tell which it was often, but he says in many cases, the organic writers, their first draft is their outline. And then they have to go back and rework it, while the outline people, they might actually be done when they get to the end. But he said that it wasn't oh, you can tell this book was one or the other. It just was a different way. And he thought they were both good.
When Moss says that their first draft is their outline, that's what I meant when I said everybody outlines.
Yeah, they
By which I
organize
mean,
it then.
I don't mean that everyone plans everything out ahead of time. Some people write very organically. I do myself. I think of my writing as like a chess game. I usually have everything I write, at least, is always based around some sort of opposition. I don't write. I write drama. I don't write slice of life. I don't do vignettes. Except when I do.
Well,
so the drama is always usually good guys and bad guys, and I usually have the good guys do something that forces a decision on the bad guys. They only have a number of limited opportunities of what they can do in retaliation. And then when the bad guys do something back, the good guys are faced with a limited choices. And so trying to set up a situation where each side has choices that are interesting and dramatic, where each side has to pay a price every time they do something. That's what I mean when I say I try to make it chess-like. The only book I've ever outlined in detail was one called Superluminary, where I had to keep careful track of the clues as they were being revealed to the reader, because it was an intrigue story, and part of the drama was figuring out who the bad guy was among the family members. Were all super scientists who were stabbing each other in the back. Okay, and you want to find out who it was. For that one, I actually made an outline and used the hyperlink feature in my Word document so that I could click back and forth in the various stages of my outline to see where the setup was and where the payoff was for each of the 52 clues that I peppered through the 22 chapters. So,
interesting.
Otherwise, my first novel, The Golden Age, the setup was really simple and the problem was really clear, and what the heroes and what the hero and what the villains were doing was pretty much set up so well ahead of time that I could just do it out of my head, except that the surprise twist ending at the end was something I did not foresee until I was actually typing the words on the page, and I suddenly realized
it had to be
it had to be that way and it had to be that guy. Now, this is why I believe in the muse. This is why I do not believe the theory that I make up the story. I don't. I didn't. I'm merely writing down what is being dictated to me by some supernatural power. So
I believe that too. I've had.
I know. I believe in you. This is one thing. It was really. It's given me a vocabulary word to describe the creative energy that is being channeled through you, and I really thank you. That's a gift you've given me, is a word. And once you have a word that can describe
sesquipedalianism,
no, the muse. I
didn't make up that. Muse.
I didn't make up that word. It's Greek. It's
okay.
short for.
It's all Greek to me. All right, but see, I'm going to be a little skeptical, Mr. Wright. Okay, and I think we've known each other just long enough that
are you going to mock Utripe and Thalia? And
no, I'm going to push back on this a little tiny bit of arrogance, because you're saying that you write these things cold. Okay, now I will say that my favorite thing that I've read by you is the Orphans of Chaos trilogy. That's why I put that as the Orphans of Chaos to me.
Yeah, I wrote that cold.
That is classic. Now, I've read that, and I cannot believe it's hard. It's hard for me to believe. It's hard for me to comprehend how you can develop such complex magical systems without having a large planning outline document describing those magical systems that you have in place that you could refer to.
You are not taking into account that he runs off-the-cuff role-playing games that he used to run 24/7 whenever anybody was available.
Oh, no,
also, with complicated magic systems, he keeps all in his head.
But in this case, I think I might have had a planning document.
I think you had a bit of a chart for who overcame who.
Yeah, I had a chart.
He did have a chart
for the paper, scissors, rock of that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, here's all I did for that one. I just took 4 or 5 basic philosophies of mankind, and I metaphorized them into a magic system. So that, for example, Victor was a materialist. He believed everything was made of atoms, and so his magical power was the ability to rearrange atoms.
Right.
Okay.
I love it. I thought it was wonderful. It was wonderfully.
The girl Windrose was an A. Van Vogt styled null A philosopher, which is an obscure philosophy that was made up by I.B. Korzybinski in the turn of the century, kind of a bit of a crackpot, but I like him. And so the idea of morality, I wanted to make the fourth dimension something interesting and put something there. So I decided to put music, morality, and other things that we regard as non-physical. into the higher dimensions. And I simply use the metaphor of red and blue as the way to describe motion torn and away from the W axis of the three-dimensional reality, and so on. One of the characters was a shaman. One of the characters was a magician.
But you designed
But it's fascinating because
right?
there was almost like they couldn't really communicate with each other. They didn't have any concept.
That was based on my philosophical observation that your different worldviews render you mutually incomprehensible to each other unless you can agree upon an axiom. So I deliberately picked axioms that, and this was based on a game.
It for a role-playing game. He designed it
was
to
a game,
be a game that we didn't
Windrose,
run.
Windrose was a character in your game.
Right, but I'm saying the magic system you designed when you were going to run a game that we didn't.
I ran two or three of my novels. I've lost count. Are based on role-playing games that we run through. So the whole scenario has been thought, experimented out by me and my friends.
That was going to be my answer.
Well, how old were you? How old were you when you did that? Do you think?
1098. Oh, there's one thing I forgot to mention.
He started it.
There's one other thing I forgot to mention that makes it easy for me to do this cold. Orphans of Chaos is Roger Zelazny's Nine Princes of Amber. I just stole his book.
Well, see, and Ryan Princes of Amber. That's my favorite fantasy novels of all time.
Well, that's why you like the ripoff.
Did I
disguise it for you not to see it?
Let me tell him.
No, I don't think. I think it's very well disguised.
I called them from Chaos. Okay.
Well, I get it. But
there's a bunch of guys living on a mountain in the middle of the universe called Olympus. It's the same as Colvire.
Let me tell him the Zelazny Chalker, because we were talking about outlining.
Oh yeah, Chalker.
Let me tell you the Zelazny Chalker story. So Jack Chalker was the English teacher of someone I went to college with.
Okay.
And he said that he told a story about Roger Zelazny. Zelazny came to him one day and said, "Jack, I've been given a contract to write a mystery." And Chalker said, "Roger, you can't write a mystery. A mystery requires an outline." And sure enough, Zelazny had to give the money back because that was not how he wrote.
Did he write like you do then? He wrote
apparently that's all I know about it. I got to meet him once or twice, but never got to ask him about how he wrote.
Well,
He's
Jack
also
Chalker,
the guy I follow with all my writing.
The Well of Souls series by Jack Chalker, I think, is another all-time classic. That kind of. Have you read that? A Midnight Well of Souls, Nathan Brazil, and all that? It's wonderful. I love that series, and I watched. I've actually I've read that series. That's one of my all-time, and it kind of has gotten forgotten. I think some of these.
There's a number of really good ones from when I was young that just are overlooked, but they're not necessarily any worse.
Let me tell my Jack Chalker story, which is not as interesting as my wife's.
I want to answer his question.
So he was at a convention once, and he was telling a story about he was writing his 4-book series, Wolf in the Fold, Snake in the Grass, and so on. I forget which series it was. That wasn't the Well of Souls series, was it?
No.
And there was a setup of a big mystery. And he read a reviewer who said, "This guy is never going to tie this together and come to an ending," And Chalker told the story at the convention and just laughed. And he says, "Look, I outlined all 4 books before I set pen to paper. Okay, so the ending, the last chapter was the first one I wrote, so it's already done. It's already in my safe back home. Are you kidding me? What do you mean? There's no way I can get there."
Yeah, actually, that's kind of. I have the ending of my book written. And I have I have the beginning and the end, and now I'm just filling the middle in.
For a detective story, you have to write it backwards. You write the end first, and then you go back and place the clues to lead and mislead the reader toward the end. The inevitable end.
Yeah, I spend hours and hours thinking about the end of my story so that I know how to work backwards to what I'm writing. But I wanted to answer your Save the Cat, and it's
describe what Save the Cat is for anybody who's not.
It is that.
It's that there's beats.
Yeah, I think it's like outlining. For me, the story is organic, so I can't really break it down that way. I'm just doing it like he's saying by this vector is leading to that vector. I think like an outline, if using those models is helpful in figuring out, okay, at this part, I think I need my story to move forward or something like that. Then I say, go for it. And like the outlining, if it's not helpful, put it aside. So it really is a question of, does looking at it that way spark your imagination, or does it interfere with what's coming naturally to you?
Let me give you a warning. one of my stories, Lost on the Last Continent, I had outlined, and up to a certain point, and then as I was following my outline, my main character said to me, "Hey, wouldn't it be great if I just put on the magic flying ring and ordered it to take me to where it came from, so that I would accidentally be teleported head over heels into this extremely dangerous situation of confronting this ancient, august, evil power, which might actually be the good guy that gave me this stupid magic ring?" And I said, "Gee, character, that's a wild idea. That would be really reckless." And he said, "Are you kidding me? I'm a big game hunter who's trapped on a continent full of dinosaurs." I said, "Go for it." So I typed in to see what would happen. And then I realized everything I had outlined after that point was thrown out the window. So I had to throw it out the window. Okay.
I love it.
Fortunately, I got back into safe water once I got into a fight scene where, by merely having every single character be from a different period of history and using a different type of weaponry to blow up even more and more things in more and more dramatic ways, I was able to keep the action going until I think I destroyed the entire Sidereal universe, either in that story or another one.
My experience
I'm
is
kidding.
the opposite.
That timeline got aborted, so that never happened.
Write an outline at all in the first half to a three of the book. But once I get beyond the half point, then I can write one without any trouble, because now it's pretty much clear where it's going to go. And it's just a matter of me noting down which points I want to make. But the points are already set up, so it's not going to interfere with my imagination to make a note of them. So,
let me offer I really quickly offer one more metaphor for what it is like for being a writer, and I'm not the only writer who said this.
Okay.
Imagine you're standing on a hill and overlooking a foggy valley. You can see
Terry Pratchett's description, right?
Through the fog, you can sometimes see some part of the path you're going to follow, at least certain of the glades and openings. And then in the distance, you can see the peak that you're trying to get to. You can see where the end point is going to be, happy ending or sad ending, right? But part of the adventure is going down into the fog and trying to get from point A to point B and find out how to get there. So, and the interesting thing is you're controlled by what I call the logic of character. Once you've established anything about the character, his name, his favorite food, the fact that he's actually four-dimensional, or some other minor thing like that, it forces certain possibilities and eliminates other ones. So on your very first word of your first line, certain possibilities are eliminated. For example, I start all of my stories by having my main character's parents be killed in line 1 of chapter 1 of book 1, so that people feel sorry for them.
No, no, but you do have a lot of your characters have amnesia.
I forgot that. You're right.
But I love that. That's what I love about Nine Princes in Amber, and there is that element in Orphans of Chaos, which I do understand.
I'm not kidding. A number of John's characters. It was one of his favorite things when he was younger.
Let me tell you why. You reveal.
Let me tell you why. It allows the reader to find out about the character at the same time the character himself does.
Exactly.
So everything is fresh.
Right.
They're always stories of self-discovery. Say.
Right.
And I love epiphanies. I love sudden revelations where you find out you're the son of the king, or you find out you're actually a robot, or you find out you've actually been dead for years.
Oh my God, the time. I'll tell you, you've given me a little bit of a nightmare, which is the head chopping, time shape shifting robot that comes to you to kill you with its sword, and your head is already in its little container. I'll tell you, that is one of the creepiest characters I've ever read in any book, and well done, sir, I must say.
Yes.
Well, John ran Metachronopolis as a role-playing game.
Oh, and gosh. Is this like Dungeons and Dragons?
Players,
what other kind? Yeah,
only slightly. It's more like somebody's put you in a novel. The two players were so paranoid because they could so easily be erased and so many people were out to get them, that they would meet twice as often as they did with the moderator, so that they could have a whole session just to talk to each other about what they were going to do when they knew nobody was.
And sometimes I moderate easy, and sometimes I moderate on hard.
That one was on hard.
And that one was on nightmare level.
Did a good job,
because if they had made a single mistake, if they'd made a single error, I would have wiped them out of the time stream.
Well, and then
the game was similar to my story. They were ex-cops who had been fired from the time cop bureau by the time travelers, but the time travelers didn't erase them like they normally do, so they knew that they were going to do something and time travelers want it done. That's why they were being kept around. But they aren't time travel themselves. They couldn't predict the future.
They wanted to find out what it was, so they didn't do it too quickly, because they would just get eliminated. It was really interesting.
Right.
But that's the real answer from my experience for us about writing is
you time travel forward into the future where you've already done it. You steal your manuscript and then you come back to now and then.
Yeah, that's right. See, there's your secret right there.
That's the joke I read you yesterday, where someone asked if Dune was a cheap ripoff of Star Wars, and the answer was no, it was an expensive ripoff because not only did he have to change the names, he had to invent time travel and go back and publish it.
Go back 20 years, yeah.
12 years earlier.
Well, I want to ask you a little bit more forward because I got lots of. I love this because I've studied your class, and one of the things that I think is just wonderful, and I'd like to hear how you do it, is you say take your character and then like put them into misery, and then when they're in the misery zone, pour some more misery on them and make it worse and worse and worse. And I gotta say,
I got that from Donald Moss. Actually,
may I call in one other member of my family?
Yo, come on in. Yes.
Hey, Justinian, can you tell us the formula for?
Wait, before he comes on, going back to your previous topic, this is our brand new Catholic who joined the Catholic Church on Sunday.
Congratulations! I'm also a Catholic church. I'm also a Catholic convert, Catholic convert.
I'm not a Catholic.
Reconcile. I understand.
I'm putting you on the spot because I'm hoping you can remember what the formula is.
Yes, the formula is approximately.
Tell him
one
who it's from.
Step repeated 4 times.
Tell him who it's from. It's from the guy who wrote. He wrote Doc Savage. Doc Savage written by Lester Dent. This was a pulp writer who. This was a.
Okay, fine.
Is he in the range of the mic? Can you hear him?
Hello.
Yes, I hear him. Good voice.
Okay.
Go.
Lester Dent formula. So. Every single Doc Savage story follows this formula exactly. You start with our hero. You give him a fistful of trouble. Then there's you continue to ratchet up the tension until it leads to a fight or a chase scene or some sort of action scene, and then there's a twist, right? And that's the first 1,500 words if it's
pulp size,
yeah,
right.
That's the first fourth of the story. Then the second fourth. Okay, you don't want to pay attention to this one because it's you don't want to miss it. What you do then is that you give him even more trouble. Just pile on the trouble. Just really make sure he gets it right in the neck. Yeah,
gets it in the neck.
Not enough trouble. You need more trouble. Then the tension continues to ramp up until eventually there's some sort of fight or chase or action scene, and then there's another twist, and that's the halfway mark at this point. At this point, if you're following Dark Side form, I think at this point is when you go to your exotic location for the book, South America or India or wherever. Then for the third part, okay, this part's really important. You gotta get this right. You want to give him even more trouble. Just pile on, just shovel trouble on top of your character so he's swimming in it. All right, and then that should continue to build the tension until eventually that leads to another fight or action scene or chase scene. Maybe someone can get captured, or you have to rescue someone who was captured earlier, whatever. And then there's another twist, and then that leads you. Then you're approximately 3/4 of the way through the book at this point. So you're pretty close to the end. So you just want to wrap it up. So keep it simple and just give him even more trouble. Just pour the trouble over the guy. Make sure because it's a finale, right? So you want it to be maximum problem. So you just ramp up the level of trouble that this guy has, which should, if you're doing it right and writing perfectly logically, lead to another fight. And at this point, it's the finale, so there's no revelation. Well, maybe there's a final revelation. I don't remember the formula that well.
It's optional. Yeah.
But then God kills the bad guy. And everyone goes home, and everything's resolved, and
lives happily ever after.
Are you a budding author? Is this a budding author here? Are you going to be writing?
Yes, everyone in my family is an aspiring author.
He's one of our 2 authors.
If you're writing a romance novel rather than an action sequence,
this is the other novel.
The other one, Eric.
If you're writing a romance novel rather than an action novel, what you do is instead of jamming with a fistful of trouble in the neck, you jam with a fistful of trouble that tends to keep the boy and the girl apart. You set it up so it's clear they're meant for each other. So, you usually give them the girl one or two options between Rhett and Ashley, and then you put something in the way like the Civil War that prevents them from being together.
This is great. See, this is inspirational. See, you're giving
I have a whole 4 or 5 articles about romance, by the way. I could send you those too. There's no videos, it's just articles.
Well,
But-
so tell me more about the idea here is you take your character, your hero character, your central character, and you give them boatloads of problems. In fact, you used a movie for that. Like you said, there was
So Moss, when he talks about it, talks about ratcheting up the tension,
raising the stakes. I think is the
raising the
phrase he
stakes.
uses,
But
yeah.
what I've found is it depends on your story.
Yeah.
You know, if it's sad, you make it sadder. If it's funny, you make it funnier. You know. But as far as trouble, a simple rule of thumb, and I've seen this happen to more than one person, so it's not. It may not be for everyone, but it's not just me. If you feel bad for your character, that's probably a good sign. But if the thing you think of to happen is so terrible that you burst out laughing, that's really a good sign.
Well, this is what was happening. In fact, the book I just wrote, which was the Death Penalty Desires, a Passion, Lust, and Murder, it was a murder mystery kind of novel, and I kept piling crap on that lead character's head, and it was it was making me laugh out loud because I was like, "Oh, this is
that's it. That's a good sign.
That's
a good sign. The only thing I warn is that up and down motion is important. I've seen people who put their characters in a terrible position and nothing ever happens except that it gets worse, and you never get to take a breath. So you kind of need to have the character have a good thing happen occasionally so that, that next part of the roller coaster seems even more terrible. Because if it's just all bad things, the reader will become a nerd to it. They won't care anymore.
Now this kind of leads us into the next thing, which is character.
Let me interrupt for a real quick comment about genre also.
Okay.
It also depends on what genre you're writing in. For example, a funny story, a comedy story, the readers will forgive a lot more improbabilities as long as it's funny.
Yeah.
A horror story, likewise, the readers will forgive a lot of improbabilities as long as it's scary. Whereas if you're writing a science fiction story, even if it has horrific elements in it, that's got to be, readers are unforgiving about certain things like the scientific accuracy.
Yeah.
If you're writing historical, especially historical romance, readers are unforgiving about historical details.
And sadly, I've discovered that it's even more complicated than readers being unforgiving of historical details. The readers are unforgiving if you don't include the details that they think that, if for historical romance, they think that era has. And when real research shows you that some of the things weren't like that, you have to be really careful about how you put them into your book. Is
there some kind of rule of thumb where that you can get away with 1 or 2 leaps of faith, but once you get beyond that, it becomes absurd?
If it's a science fiction or fantasy story, and part of the protocols of the genre is that you're expected to embrace an otherworldly or extraterrestrial axiom, you try to put that axiom at the beginning. It can't be a surprise, or else it looks like a Deus Ex Machina.
And I would say it differently. I would say, do you know what the term lamp shading means? That's the right term, right?
Yes.
Where you include a line to explain something that's unlikely. Even it's as simple as the characters themselves going, boy, that was unlikely.
Oh, okay, yeah.
If you, the author, show by any means that you're aware that something seems hard to take or unlikely,
yes,
the reader will go with it, you see, because then
like Monty Python in Life of Brian, when the spaceship captures him and it erupts in, he's like, "You are bloody lucky," you know. It's like so there was that comment. It's absurd, but it was a device to get him out of
the comedian.
But if you don't explain it, that's when it's hard to take.
If you don't explain it, the reader thinks you're imposing on his gullibility.
Yeah,
you say. But if you wink at him, he can let you get away with it sometimes.
But
again, like everything, there's a certain delicacy. The comedian Johnny Carson, who used to run the Tonight Show back when it was good, when his jokes would bomb, he would admit it. He would make a joke about how bad that joke was, and he would laugh at it, and he would wink at the audience, and they would be on his side. See, because then he wasn't an unfunny comedian; he was a funny guy who just was laughing at the bad joke along with them. Yeah. That's what lampshading is.
It kind of reminds me of the second Indiana Jones movie, which I don't like because there's so many impossible things that happen in a row. It's like the thing.
They lost me when they leapt out of an airplane in a life raft. That just broke my suspension of disbelief.
There was just too much I had to accept. The first one there's a lot of absurdity, but it's like, okay, you have to accept one. One thing happens or two things happen. With the other one, it's like a roller coaster of impossible events that just Wendy H knows, and just
right.
end to end, and it just became like, this is just stupid. This is just
right.
So that kind of is the
because keep in mind, as a writer, you are inviting the reader to enter into the world of your imagination so he can entertain himself, and the reader's doing you a favor because he has other things he can do with his time. He doesn't have to buy your book. He could spend it on getting a 6-pack of beer, and if he's more entertained by the beer than by your book, then you failed as a writer. Okay,
for him.
So you can't. You can't impose on him. You can't impose on his credulity, except for what he's willing to. It's like a hypnotic spell. He's willing to let you cast your spell on him, but you have to make it believable enough that you're not imposing on him.
This is kind of parallel to I've been wanting for ages to write a series of articles that maybe I'll do sometime soon because I've actually been thinking about them again, about genre and the search for truth. And I have a theory that every genre has something that the reader is searching for. And it comes from the fact that I once read somebody saying, well, why would anyone want to read a genre where they all know that all the romances have a happy ending? And I realized that a happy ending is to a romance the way knowing the laws of nature is to a mystery. You can't solve a locked room mystery if you don't know that they have teleportation. You can't figure out the things a person who enjoys romances are trying to figure out if you don't know that there's one right guy who's the right guy and they're going to live happily ever after. So I have this theory that all genre are like that there's a thing, a truth they're looking for. Right. They're all like a mystery, and it's different things that you're trying to figure out as you read through the different genres.
That's
one time I had a whole list for about 6-10 different genres, and I lost the list, so I never wrote the articles, but maybe I can.
No, I love it. That's a brilliant idea. I think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. It's an interesting.
Because reading make-believe books is based on children's make-believe. What children do is they learn by play acting out what they see their grown-ups doing. So when children see their middle-class parent, their middle-class dad go off to work, they pretend to be cowboys and Indians and butcher each other in vicious range wars, you see, because that's what they're training themselves to learn how to do. The little boys are trained to learn how to control their aggression and how to be aggressive, how to be brave. And the reason why we look at heroes is because those guys are exemplars of how we should behave. Christians especially look at Christ as the exemplar of behavior, but all the saints are also exemplars of other type of behavior. Not everyone has to be a bookish saint like St. Thomas Aquinas. They can be a warrior saint like St. George. You see what I'm saying? All these fictions are examples of correct or incorrect behavior.
Yeah.
And for tragedy, you show how the incorrect behavior leads inevitably to the downfall. For a comedy, you show how the correct behavior leads to a Shakespearean wedding where five couples get married at once, and the evil baron the evil duke decides to become a monk.
This gentleman said he had other questions for us.
Yeah, well, no, this is wonderful. I mean, I'm enjoying this. Is just a wonderful, and thank you very much for coming on, Mrs. Wright, because I know that we
don't have like 10 or 15 minutes left, so let's get to the other questions.
See, this is why I want to ask questions, because character development, because what you were saying, I had a character in my last book that I wrote that was so opposite of me. He was like the polar opposite of me. He was high Z, and he had this grill, and he was like yo, 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 in a car that was all low and made a muffler. And it was so opposite of me that I just loved him. And I poured this stuff and created this character. It was like it was so just making him and bringing him to life as like a puppet was funny. It was every time I read those chapters now, it cracks me up because I'm cracking myself up because it's so absurd. But now
that's why John and I talk about the logic of character.
Right.
Because after a point, the character seems to have its own logic, and it's like we're just reporting on what it's doing.
Right. Now,
how do you do that? How do you do that? You don't. The muse does it. The character springs to life after you get enough detail, and basically what you need for one easy shortcut is to find out what the paradox of the character is.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
This was my favorite Donald Moss technique, and I recommend people read his book for it. But I did put it in a short version of it. Basically, you take the character's quality or his goal, or you can do it with both, and you write a short scene where he exhibits the opposite quality, or you come up with two goals that conflict. So he both wants to be the greatest adventurer and he never wants to leave home because he wants to take care of his mom or whatever. You see, the moment you have two conflicting goals, the character starts coming to life.
Oh,
and if you get too conflicted, he's sullen, and then you write a scene where he suddenly bursts into laughter, or he's funny all the time, and you write a scene where he's actually really morose, you start bringing out the three-dimensional quality of this character. And the key is that the character has to have two or three different qualities so that when he walks into a room, I think one of the examples I give in a book is, imagine a guy's a father, a Christian, and he plays guitar. Well, if a father walks into a room, he can only do fatherly things. If he's in character, it's going to be relating to fathering. Christian things. Guitar player, guitar playing things. But if a guy walks in and he has three qualities, he could react to something that happened by making a fatherly wise comment, or he could react by breaking into song that he wrote recently, or his favorite song from the radio or something. It gives him a range, and yet the reader goes, oh, yes, that's him.
Yeah.
Because they know that you're bringing out one of these qualities that the character has. Now, a lot of times the characters we're closest to just do this automatically. The character comes to life and he's automatically got his Zoom or whatever it is, and he's good. But it's really wonderful when you're dealing with the characters who are not the ones that leap off the page. You can help them off the page by helping them develop a couple of different interests or a couple of different qualities that have a bit of conflict, so that you give them some range, because then it's interesting to the reader. The reader can recognize that the character is still himself and yet not know exactly how he's going to react, because he could go with one. A perfect example is Rhett Butler deciding to go join the army when they're losing.
Right. Yeah.
Because
and he's so against, he's such a capitalist, apathetic kind of guy. And then all of a sudden it's like, what? You're going to the army? Yeah.
But he grew up as this Southern society young man. And when the chips are down, that's the part of his personality that comes to the fore. So it's astonishing, but then you go, oh, of course. You see, and that's how you want a character. You want him to both be surprising, but you want the surprise to come out of some quality that you've established about the character, so the reader feels as if it's inevitable, even though they didn't see it coming.
Okay, but I want John to talk, but first I have a super chat from Let's Go Brandon, who is, he says, free sidecars, get your free scars. Do an abundance of love for the chat. Steve will drink a sidecar every time it's mentioned. Well, we'll see about that. You know, Mr. Brandon, that $4.99 is insufficient for sidecar. You know, the rule here is $100, but I appreciate come tomorrow, because we're going to have a party stream. We'll talk. Anyways, this is Let's Go Brandon, who makes an appearance in my book, actually, is the bartender in Las Vegas.
So one of your own characters is giving you money.
Yeah.
Never take bribes. Never take bribes from your characters. Never fall in love with them. Never hate them. Just have a professional and cool relationship with the characters.
No one has
and at the end, just shake hands, and they can go off to their next life or what have you. Because usually they should be dead at the end of the story. That way, no one can.
Absolutely not.
That way, no one can
do that. Kill everybody. Kill them all. Well,
no, I'm kidding. But in Europe, before there was copyright laws, Cervantes wanted to kill off Don Quixote so that people would stop putting him in stories of their own invention, because they, of course, were using him badly.
That's why he dies.
That's why he dies at the end of the second book, the second volume.
I was once in a discussion about
John. You're looking puzzled. Is there something I did that you said?
No, I'm just trying to think. What year was that? What year was?
Cervantes was a survivor of the Battle of Lepanto, which that should tell you something.
Yeah. And so when did copyright law come in?
Later.
1700s, 1800s.
Well,
okay, so there's an incongruity. Was this another time travel thing? All right. Anyway, well,
Oh, you had a
but
question.
here's my question for John, though. Okay, is the character development, because we talk about breathing life in these characters. And I love that idea about having conflicting goals and the multiple dimensions of characters. You've got the three-dimensional character, the two-dimensional character, but the three-dimensional characters, those are the heart of our story, and those are the ones that have multiple conflicting, and they're deep, and they have character arcs, and they have motivations. But when do you find, when do you pull out the fact that like they cut against character? I mean, how often can you do that? I always think about, again, let's use the Indiana Jones when he's the whipper, and then he pulls the gun out and shoots, right? Well, if he does that, then of course he shoots everybody.
That's a shtick. That's not a character trait. A character trait is that he's afraid of snakes, although he's fearless in every other situation.
Okay, and then, but if he overcomes his fear of snakes, then it's not a thing anymore. So
right.
At some point he has to confront his fear. Like, how often can you get away with that?
Not in an Indiana Jones story, because they don't, action stories don't require complex characters. For example, in Star Wars, the only thing you need to know about the lovable rogue Han Solo in the first movie is that he's a ruthless rogue who's willing to shoot someone and shoot first when threatened, that he's only out for the money. But you find it at the end that he's a heart of gold because he races into the rescue even when there's no profit in it for him. Mm-hmm. You say he only needs two qualities because he's an action hero. You say. Okay.
Now, do you find other
romance character, and he needs a three-dimensional quality to him? He has to actually love the old South that he's so skeptical about. You say.
And then of course, right, and of course, Scarlett O'Hara, she has a character arc where she's the kept woman, and she's this, but she's also hard as nails deep down, and she's a survivor. Right. And that quality, of course, she goes through this journey of survival. And even when, she comes back and she finds that the land is her passion, and she discovers herself. But at that point, it's tragedy because she's lost the love of her life.
Correct.
And Red. Correct. So very complex. I gotta tell you,
her living through the Reconstruction at the time when the book was written during the Great Depression, that really spoke to a lot of readers.
Yeah.
You see. And keep in mind that when it was written, the Civil War was still within living memory. They were 80-year-olds who
living memory, and they were in the Depression. So that's one reason why, even up until the 90s and possibly well beyond, if you redid ticket sales by sale of ticket numbers rather than by money, Gone with the Wind had still outsold all the other movies well into the.
It's a wonderful movie. It's one of my favorites.
And it's partially because it spoke to them so much. As God is my witness, I'll never be hungry again. Spoke to the people who were suffering through the Depression.
They managed to capture the main elements of the book on film, which is very difficult.
Yeah, they did a really good job.
Most film adaptations are terrible, and that one was really, really well done. So now we're not here to talk about film. Did you have any other?
Well, yes, a couple.
Your question about me, I'm not going to be able to answer your question. When I make up a character, I do two things. One, I steal him from some other book I like. For example, Phaeton appeared in some myth or other by the Greeks. Okay. My current character is named Napoleon. He's Napoleon Solo from
he had to change his name to Napoleon Lone.
Yeah, from Man from U.N.C.L.E. And he's also Lamont Cranston, because I stuck that in here too. So here's what you do. As a master thief, you steal two characters and you collide and amalgamate them. And so the personality conflict has to also be internal, because he's got to have at least two goals that conflict with each other. There's got to be a thing he wants and a price that he has to pay, or an obstacle that is in the way, including whatever's going on internally in his mind. A good example of how to do this on TV is the original Star Trek. Captain Kirk basically had two sides of his personality, the disciplined side and the human side, and they were represented by his two friends, Dr. Bones McCoy and Mr. Spock.
Oh, yeah.
See? But even Mr. Spock, he's the only Vulcan that's been on stage in any Star Trek show, I hate to say it, that actually has some personality, because they said, oh, no, he's half human, so he actually has emotions that he fights, and he has to suppress his human nature. And everyone who ever has had a conflict between their heart and their head, between their emotional side and their logical side, understands what Spock is going through. He's like Prometheus.
It's also in Pinocchio, or Pinocchio, who wants to be the robot, or Asimov's robots, kind of like they're always wanting to be human. Spock has
Asimov robots never wanted to be human. I'm sorry, you're mistaken about that.
Oh, am I? Okay, I defer.
Not Asimov's robots. Asimov's robots were his idea of what an intellectual that was purely logical and purely unable to harm human beings should end up ruling us.
Have you ever met Asimov by any chance?
Nope. I've never had the honor. I've never had the pleasure.
You did? You did meet
He's a funny guy, but I've never met him.
In the 80s, I went to a lot of conventions, so I met like most of the authors that were big before.
But I met
at least briefly.
But I met Gene Wolfe. I went to mass with Gene Wolfe.
We met Gene Wolfe a number of times and went to church with him.
Excellent. Well,
and now I met Zelazny twice.
I
had him sign a library book, and I gave it back to the library.
And I met Tim Powers.
We met Tim Powers a few times.
Zelazny is my all-time favorite.
I tell you, I once was standing in the now non-existent World Trade Center in New York City. And I was at an awards ceremony, and there was an empty seat next to Zelazny. And I was standing at the door, and my legs were shaking. I was so frightened. And I thought, if I don't walk over there, I will regret it for the rest of my life. And if I do, the worst that'll happen is something will embarrass me. So I got my legs to move. I sat next to him for the whole awards ceremony. And that courage helped me later. There were other times in life where even though nothing big came of sitting next to Lazzy, I said one or two things to him.
Ironically,
the courage, learning to be courageous, really made a difference.
Ironically, Zelazny had been exposed to radiation, and she got disease from that.
No,
and he's a vampire, and he sucked the blood out of her.
No,
and she had to go on a
secret
journey through 40 reincarnations before she returned to this life.
None of this is
true.
But
the time travelers have erased all record of it, and only I know.
But Tim Powers was there. Orson Scott Card was there.
I hate those time travelers.
I think Gene Wolfe was there too. It was
yes,
an amazing event. And
that's cool.
I ran into a friend a few years later, and he was like, well, just after Zelazny had died, and a friend I met at that event. And he said, both Zelazny and the World Trade Towers are gone.
Well, now what about where do you guys make appearances now, and what's the status of Mr. Wright's book? Like, what's the status of your writing? Do you have new books in the works? I know that you have a whole series that's churning.
I was disappointed in the way Disney killed Star Wars, mutilated the corpse, tried to reanimate it by unlawful necromancy, and then sacrificed it on a satanic altar, and then came to my house and slapped me in the face, insulted me for being a Star Wars fan. I may be exaggerating slightly, but I don't think I am. So as a joke, I wrote up a movie review of someone from a nearby parallel timeline where the Force snoozes, and the Force hits the snooze alarm and goes over and goes back to sleep, whatever the name of that movie was. The Force Awakens. And my family and I, we were in a car drive, and the family, they're all writers. Okay. My kids and my wife just made up a story for me as to what we would do for a really good Star Wars to keep the action of the adventure going after the events of the original trilogy. You see, so I wrote this up as a joke, as a parody, saying, and at the end of the parody, I go, I feel sorry for guys in the stupider timeline that isn't the great one where we had this movie. Okay, I mean, just tongue in cheek. But so many people gave me such positive feedback, I said, well, why don't I actually write this up? I'll just change the names a little bit. No one will recognize it. I'll call it Star Quest. I'll have it be a Galactic Imperium. I'll say Napoleon, Han Solo will be called Raytheon Lone, not Solo. Get it? And I'll make the farm boy into a slug farmer named Jagwin, and I'll give him an outrageous Irish clodhopper accent, So, and then I'll stick in the Shadow and the Phantom from comic books, and throw in a bunch of pirates from Long John Silver's from Treasure Island. No one will recognize it. And it originally, and I'll throw in Catwoman because I like Catwoman. So I sat down to write a 4-book trilogy. I can't count.
We did a crowdfunder for this 4-book,
and it erupted into it. And then one day,
on book 9.
And then one day I said to the wife, "Hey, I really like One Piece. I really like the way they handle character development." I like the way Odo Obanagi, not Obanagi.
I don't know how to pronounce his
Oda, Japanese name guy. I like the way he does character development because all of his characters have a certain paradox to them. They have certain and they have internal tensions that are understandable based on their past traumas, and they all have an overriding goal, and that's a very important thing to make a character likable. Give him a dream, you see, and that's I'll point out that the opening line, the first time we meet Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, is he says, "I want to get off this rock. There's a great, wonderful world out there somewhere, and I'm on a planet that's the farthest from it." Okay. In the opening voiceover of Star Trek, the captain says he's on a mission to explore strange new worlds, to go where no man has gone before. You see. So you know what their dream is right away.
Gilligan's Island was only a 3-hour tour. How did that work out?
Well, their dream is to get off the island, but since it's a comedy, they're going to be hit in the face of the pie every time when they try. It's going to be Gilligan's fault. If they just strangled him in his sleep one evening, they'd be off the island in 12 hours. So.
I really love One Piece because it's the only thing I've ever seen that has the same complexity of characters as the role-playing games that John used to run.
Oh, let me finish my story. I tried to One Piece it, and then my 4-book trilogy turned into a 12-book trilogy, and I'm on book 9 right now.
So, well, is there any? I mean, is there light at the end of the tunnel, or is it just a?
Sure, I have the outline all. I have the outline all worked out.
He actually has an outline for this one.
Okay, and well, what's the timeline for release? I mean, for all of the
first one,
John Wright fans.
The first one is supposed to come out this fall.
Okay.
So the rest of them, he's trying to hold as many as possible so that he can make changes back and forth when he needs to.
Sure.
But there's another guy writing Star Quest books, but he's writing like 12,000 or 100,000 years earlier. I forget what the time difference is.
Oh, and I should mention,
he's going to be publishing them.
You asked me about taking notes.
So he wants the first one out.
He
has a huge group of notes for this.
My notes for this include like everything you could picture. My background,
races, background, and he has a blurb.
And I decide I love writing timelines and I love doing maps because I was a Tolkien fan when I was young.
Right.
So John has a whole packet that we've given to some other writers. If other writers want to write in the Star Quest background, they're welcome to approach us about it.
So my notes, just for my background notes, is 50 pages long.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And now,
but this is a big, it's like a bigger
project.
But keep in mind that when I sit down to write, take notes on my timeline to keep things straight, I typically, if you saw my book Count to a Trillion, I typically start at the beginning of the universe and go through to the end. I mean, I just like making stuff up because I think that if you make it up I make up more detail in the background than I intend to use in the book.
One of the things
it gives it a feeling. It gives it a feeling of realism that the reader can detect.
So I got to know John because he was running a role-playing game in college. And one of the things that impressed me was he started at the plate tectonics for the world.
Oh my God.
Well, for the map, I wanted to know where the
I worked out the map.
I wanted to know where the mountains would be so that I would, and which way the prevailing wind was, so I would know where the rivers were and things like that.
Yeah,
so you see,
I'm with you. I get that. I have a map that I did for my fantasy novel I'm trying to write, and this is why I wanted to have you on. But the character stuff and there's so much. It's overwhelming. I mean, nonfiction I think is easier.
That's why I'm a big believer in thievery, because if I just steal a character, then I don't need to make up the details. And if I collide him with another character, no one can detect that it's the theft.
Let me tell you something John and I have found out that might transfer over into writing. Both of us run role-playing games and both of us write books.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But we seldom write books about the games we run.
Yeah.
We usually write books about the games we play in.
Right.
Because when you're a player,
it's alive in your imagination.
Has a linear, this leads to this quality. When you're
that's what I earlier called the chess-like quality.
Running the game,
where one event leads,
you see everything at once, and it's really hard to know like how to narrow down.
Interesting.
So I think what you would do if you were in the position of having made everything up is then you want to stop and think about it from one character, or however, let's say you have 3 characters, whatever. You want to really start thinking about it from their point of view. What
Well,
do they know?
that's-
What have they seen? You say?
Well, that's my novel I just wrote, which I wrote in 10 days. And it was,
Wow.
it's
Is
quite
that the mystery one?
no, it's it's this one here. Death Penalty Desires, Passion, Lust, and Murder. And I wrote this in 10 days, but the first 8 days was just, the muse speaking. And I laid out this entire arc of a murder, an investigation, a trial, and the conflict. And then once that was out, now what you just said, the two main characters, then the inspiration say, okay, now you got the framework. Here's what the character arcs are. And I had the two main characters had a character. And it was fascinating because I didn't see it until everything went out. And then it's like, okay, what's going on here? And then those two characters came alive. And there's actually a bit of a Christian message. Don't tell anybody. It's kind of sneaky in there about marriach and relationship.
That's okay. I will no doubt turn off many readers because the Force in my Star Wars is not warmed over Zen Taoism or whatever it is in George Lucas. It's actually fairly Christian, but I disguise it slightly by making it into the Stoics.
It's rather disguised.
I used to be a Stoic. And the Stoics worship the stars. So I have the outer space people worship the stars, and only some of them realize that the stars are servants of a higher power that made them. You say.
Well, one of the things I'm trying to do is bring in the idea. One of the inspirations for the fantasy novel I'm working on is to say, what if Jesus goes to this other planet or other world that's full of magic, and there's a Christ figure that's of salvation for the people, but it's in a different context where there's magic and this sort of thing, and so that's a challenge to disguise it enough, but then have the morality come through.
I mean, you might ironically, make him look like a lion or something.
Ironically, C.S. Lewis did that really well, so much so that his portrayal, even in a pantomime lion suit of Christ, is actually more dramatic than other people who have tried to make him seem more.
By the way, is why so the books I'm writing right now came from a role-playing game, but it wasn't a game I ran. It wasn't a game John ran either. A friend of ours ran it, and one of the characters was Aslan. And one of the things I had to decide when I started the book was, like, I tried making him a bear. I tried making him a deer. And I recently read a book that had Jesus/Aslan as a deer, and it really worked. But I have a scene in book 4 where he just says outright, that if I came in the shape of a bear, everyone would say, look, there goes the Lion of Judah in the shape of a bear. So I left him a lion because I figured
the character insisted
they were going to know.
The character's like,
lion.
Well, now you're referencing a novel that you're currently writing or is released.
The scene I just described in book 4, which has been out for several years.
Now, what's the name
working
of that?
on a long series.
The Unexpected Enlightenment of Rachel
Griffin. The first book is called The Unexpected Enlightenment of Rachel Griffin. The book with that scene is called The Awful Truth About Forgetting.
Let me tell you the premise of the book. It's imagine Hogwarts if you lived in a world where some magic spell had erased all knowledge of
Christianity, monotheism, Jews, Muslims.
All gone. And certain of the wizards in the hidden school, because the wizards hide from mortal men, find out there's something hiding from them.
And they begin. So the story starts where the main character, who, unlike every other book out there, is not from the world of no magic. She's come 100% from the magical world. Her family's been in it for years. She's the daughter of a duke,
an
not
aristocrat.
A poor girl.
Right.
She's got a friendly, loving family. It's actually rather hard to do because it's like the opposite of everything, in Harry Potter. But I didn't do that on purpose. It was just the way the character was. She comes upon a statue of a woman with bird wings, and there's nothing like that in any of their bestiaries. And she doesn't know what it is. And she goes back to check it later, and the wings are gone. Not just like someone tore them off. They're gone as if they'd never been there. There's moss where they were. And she has a perfect memory. Her memory cannot be tricked or confused. So she knows the wings were there, and someone has hidden them from her. And that's basically chapter 1. I think she finds out they're gone in 7. And that's the picture on the cover of book 1 is her seeing that coming upon the statue of the angel.
Now, and your books are not under Mrs. Wright, but they're under
L. Jagi Lamplighter. Lamplighter is my maiden name. It's a nice name for writing. So
yes,
great name for writing.
It is. I love that. It's
if you're going to write a book about mysterious enlightenment, what better name?
It's a
than
great writing name. So
now, can I squeeze in one more question? That is, you're saying you're stealing characters from other books and seeds, and I know that Mr. Wright has quite a bit of.
She
He's a
does not
classic
steal characters. I'm the only one who's stealing characters.
Okay, well, classical education.
She plays them in
no. But in the
games.
game, the books I'm writing, there's a lot of characters that came from other worlds, and let me tell you how complicated this has gotten.
That was Mark Whipple doing
but
it.
I had not thought out when I started that I was taking a background made up by someone else who peopled his version of Hogwarts with every single character he liked from comic books or movies. And I had to invent a new character with a whole new world that they came from for each one of them.
Wow.
So
you don't like you put a mountain. Well, but do you ever steal characters from real life?
I have some of the teachers are have different first names, but they're the teachers I really have.
Tell him the story about your editor and the school.
I will in just a moment. So Siegfried Smith, the Dragon Slayer, is John's character from the game. And one of the other characters, the Princess of Magical Australia, was the other player character. So I've had to change a lot of characters and remake up, and then you have to make up a background that makes them have the same kind of quality or importance they had before. It's really difficult. But for John's saying, so for the school, I said, well, there's actually like 150 different magic school series out there. I help run a website called Fantastic Schools and Where to Find Them, and we keep a list, and there's many.
There's a whole genre.
But most of them are either British magic schools or American magic schools. British boarding schools or American boarding schools. American boarding schools tends to be gothic in story nature. So I wanted something different. So I said, I'm going to take St. John's College where I met John. It's unusual. It's kind of neat. It's different. I'm going to just make the school run like St. John's. The only things that my editor has said, this is absolutely unrealistic, I don't think anyone would believe it, are all real things they actually do
from the real school.
From the real school, right? The things that are the most reality based are the most.
I take from the school, and it's happened like 3 separate times. They wouldn't do that.
That is why truth is stranger than fiction, because fiction we make up to suit ourselves, and so it suits us, and the reality is made up not to suit us. The world is not free of religion. It is only free of monotheism.
Yeah, there's tons of
they're all polytheists.
They're all polytheists.
My character Siegfried Smith came from St. Dismas's orphan home for dissolute criminally inclined youths.
Oh, that's my bag. That's my bailiwick over here in criminal.
St. Dismas is the patron saint of thieves, by the way.
And
but he was. I don't know how there are saints in a world where there's no monotheism, but somehow it got in there.
Basically, you don't have to read too far into the series to begin to realize that all these things exist and they've been erased by magic. But the erasing force didn't take everything.
Right.
So there's all these what they call orphan world words like friar and steeple that nobody knows where
no one knows what they mean.
From. They know what they use them for, but not where they came
erased
from.
Everyone's memory, but didn't do a perfect job. So there's still clues around for the girl with perfect memory to figure out what's really going on.
The book I'm writing right now takes place in the Regency, England, in the same world, and the changes are only like slightly less than 100 years ago. So there's these little, there's places sneaking through the cracks where you can still find these things. She goes into this temple for Poseidon in the Tower of London that happens to be in the exact same spot as the shrine to St. Peter of the Chains. And she meets this fisherman in blue and gold with a key at his hip, who says that this used to be his. So there's all sorts of cool things going on, But that's only part of it. I mean, the rest of it is romance and action and magic and fight scenes and more fight scenes. And even though it's about a 13-year-old girl, at least half of my readers are grown men, because I put all the action from, John's character and the other stuff it was a game with 3 guys and me. So it wasn't, it's from her point of view, but it wasn't a story for girls. If you understand what I'm saying.
Right. Yep.
Basically, She has the other guy who made up all the material as down as the
I'll be right back,
co-author.
Roland.
I don't know. You didn't let you put his name down, right? You just split the proceeds with him.
His name is in there. It's in the
Yeah.
But she was going to tell a story about a real character is that what it was?
No. The real school. The
They're real characters.
one of the teachers at our real school made it into the book.
Okay.
One of our tutors from St. John's that she and I both like. We went to the school at the same time. That's where we met.
Right. Okay, so that's pretty neat. So let me see. So Lamplighter is the name, and then of course John C. Wright, all his books, and I'm excited about the series that you're developing in secret, with developing like all 9 of them in one master, StarQuest.
Really
12 of them.
12.
It's getting bigger and bigger.
I've only written on book 9.
You have to launch them at some point, don't you? I mean, come on.
Well, because I did not have a New York publisher breathing down my neck, I had the leisure to write most of the books out in case I needed to change anything at the beginning to set up something at the end, or like say change a character's name. The moment the first book comes out, I'm stuck. Whatever's in that first book is then canon, and I can't change it.
Right. No, I get it. In fact, I write backwards also. Oh, we have a super chat.
But it's sad for my one fan, my mom, because because of course this long wait was something that I was not expecting.
Yeah, it's very frustrating for John because we thought it was going to be done quickly, and then he made it better, so it's taking longer. But he wants to get back to somewhere there and get back to Moth and Cobwebs and get those done. So hopefully that'll happen afterwards.
Well, Mario Trujillo, $5 super chat. Thank you. Fiction needs to make sense. Real life has no such restrictions. Forget who coined it, but saying it tends to ring true. That's good.
It's absolutely true. It's absolutely true.
Upon the Horizons over on Rumble, good to see you, my Rumble friend. And says, I love Mrs. Wright's enthusiasm. I know, I love it too. I love your enthusiasm, and you can see the joy of life in both of you. And I think there's a lot of.
I'm hiding my joy of life. I'm trying to be as dour as the donkey from Winnie the Pooh.
You can't. I know that you try, but you fail because your wife is there, and your true self is reflected in her joy.
Which is also a key to how to do writing, by the way, because the characters not only have to be complicated within themselves, but also in their interactions. Let me use Spider-Man as an example. Spider-Man's teacher turns out to be Doc Ock, one of his enemies. Spider-Man's aunt, his sick Aunt May, hates Spider-Man. His boss hates him.
Spider-Man.
The guy who picks on him, Flash
Spider-Man.
Thompson, is the founder of the fan club. Every character interaction in that cartoon has 2 opposite tensions because Spider-Man lives a double life, and of course the metaphor of trying to live 2 lives is played out to the fullest there. More so than Zorro, more so than Batman.
That's a perfect example of what we're talking about in making it worse.
I love it. Yes.
That you take.
They really stick it to the neck.
You
of
take
Spidey.
whatever the quality is, and you kind of torque it. So
how is it that Spider-Man is so great? Although I do have I must say, I am a Silver Surfer fan. How about that?
Silver Surfer is good for the opposite reason. He has all the cosmic power Spider-Man lacks, but he comes from a peaceful. He literally comes from a utopia world that he sacrificed himself to save. So he's basically a Christ figure who is on Earth surrounded by these sinful humans, and he doesn't understand their wickedness. You see, and he has to use his great powers very, very wisely. And he's been exiled from heaven. Right. So there's the character tension for you. See, he can't go back to outer space, even though he loves it.
Let's go, Brandon. Steve going to be moving more keys than Mitch in due time. Is that where you got your territory? Steve going to be moving more keys than Mitch in due time. Is that where you got your territory from? I'm not sure what that means there. Let's go. You're being confusing. You're throwing a wrench in the system. Let's go is a big supporter of mine. And well, I'll say we got, and I know I can just listen to you all day and all night. And I
We'll
just
have to do
love.
this again because I haven't eaten my dinner yet, so we have to wrap
I
this
know.
up.
Thank you for inviting me. It's always
You are
fun.
wonderful.
Come
I love
on.
you together because we get to see the real joy, the complete person. You know, we men and women are
Not
not
quite. She and I are behaving well. Normally, we both talk really loudly
It's true.
and at the same time. Sometimes on the same topic, sometimes not.
We're trying hard not to do
We're
that.
trying to
this
take
time.
turns this time.
Oh, is he?
But we have God gave us 2 ears, so I don't see why you can't talk and listen at the same time, right?
Talk over, right? Yeah. Well, that's my problem. I talk over too, but it's all in good fun. Well, so but I did want to. There is a Miami reference, and I want to invite everybody to my party tomorrow night. You're welcome too, but I know you're busy. But I'm going to have a party, a celebration party, announcing my new job in Miami.
Ooh. Wow.
Is it a mafia job? They pay well, but there are
Where are you now?
Side effects.
In Daytona Beach, Florida. And I'm going to be moving to Miami, Florida, working for the state attorney's office down there.
Congratulations.
Where all the
I've never been to Florida. This is very exciting.
Yes, it's stunning.
They're all over Florida. There's no one
I know it's a nice place. It's beyond where I've gotten to.
Yep.
I finally made it to California. So.
It means land of flowers.
Stand it stick. So come by tomorrow, 8:00 Eastern Standard Time, and join me for the party stream. All invited. Bronca's going to be here. Maybe Valhalla awaits. Is there anything else you'd like to say or plug or reference?
Sure. I would like all of your viewers to go out and buy hundreds of copies of my book so that I can quit my day job, because I would really like to just retire and write full time, and I could double and triple my production at that point.
How many more 9-book series do you have in the waiting? I believe
I hate to say it, but my Moth and Cobweb series was a 12-book series.
When it's done.
I only wrote the first 2 trilogies, and the next 2 are still just waiting.
That's okay. I've only written 6 of 21 books. So
and then somewhere there also,
and I have the end all worked out.
I quit in the middle, and I have to get back to it to get to Everywhere.
I should say mine is so long because it's based on a role-playing game where a great deal of the events were things that already came. We played some of it online, so a lot of the dialogue is written by John or by the other members, and I just rewrite it to fit into the background and then put all the story around it because the background's entirely different.
What's the name of your website, Laura?
My website?
Yeah. Is that right? Or what is it called?
I think it's just L Jagi Lamplighter, but there's nothing on it. They want something by me, they should look up Substack. I have a couple
what's
of
what's your Substack?
One of them's called Defending the Wood Perilous. And then the writing one is just called The Art and Craft of Writing.
Yeah, Sci-Fi Wright is on, and he's a very.
I'm looking for like a URL where they can find your books. Or
I would have to send it to you.
Oh well,
it's Substack, and then this. It's just if you look up Substack and my name, it'll probably all come up. I have a bunch of Substacks. One of them is
look up Substack
Roanoke Glass. So Roanoke Academy for the Sorcerous Arts is the school from my series. So I have a Substack called Roanoke Glass, which is supposed to be the newspaper from the school. Okay, well, Shane, can you pin these two to the in the chats there, because I just posted the 2 links. Sci-Fi Wright. Email to you really quick, and then you can put it in the chat. And I'll put it in the description when we get done too. But let's go, Brandon. Another super chat. Thank you, Mr. Brandon. And drinks will be on the table tomorrow, so be there. I know how much you like to nail me, and tomorrow I will be open season. So Dave told me you had a change of ways, and they're going to let you pull the switch and load rifles during power outages and drug shortages. No. In fact, one of the conditions of me going there is that I would not do death penalty cases, and they're okay with that. We'll talk all about it tomorrow. But thank you for the $5 super chat. You're getting it. And I can't move, all the plants will die. Yes, he's referring to my automatic gardening book, How and the Way to Create a hydroponic system. No, we're going to rent the house, and this is all going to be out tomorrow. John doesn't want to hear this. I'm going to rent the house, and the system will go with it. So if you want to have a hydroponic gardening system built into your rental in Daytona Beach, you come here. So so how to find John? Well, of course, he's a real author. I'm just a pretend one. John really writes.
Not a real author yet. I just said I still have a day job.
Yeah, you do have a day job, but
I did win an award. I do have a Dragon Award.
Yeah, I mean, which is pretty cool. And you've got a whole pile of books. I mean, you've got 25 plus books, and
Right.
I'm only on 7. So you're way ahead of me. But I am
Yeah.
hopefully, I'm 15 years in the future. So hopefully I'll get to that number in 15 years.
I merely hope you are as happily married as I am, which has got to be a rare thing on this world.
I am very blessed. I'm very happily married. 25 years have been married. Thank God, yes. And my wife saved me in a lot lot including
Mine too.
Wonderful.
Mine too.
That's wonderful.
She saved me from being hungry by making my dinner.
Yeah, well,
Today I put out.
Look, I also used to be an atheist, and she prayed for me, and I got converted. So
well, and similar. I'd say I was more agnostic, that I didn't care. It wasn't a big part of my life. And when I went through a very difficult period, we made a commitment that when I married her, we'd raise our son Catholic and we'd go to church. So I honored that as part of the marriage. And when I was down, the church was there for me.
Yeah.
And then it was the miracles were there. And at some point, things happen, and you're just like, you just can't deny it anymore. You just have to say, I am too humble.
Right.
I just have to say that I've been humbled, and the church was there and it saved me. And, it's like, how many times can you turn away from God before you're really tempting fate? So I said, okay.
The burden of pride is like carrying a huge, I don't know, a piano on your back of something, of you thinking about yourself, thinking how great you are. And it's just an annoyance. And when it falls off, which it does when you die to yourself and then live for Christ, you can stand up straight. You can actually be a real man, not just a pretend man.
Well, because
the thing about pride is the mother of all the other sins, because it turns you into a fake copy of yourself. You say you turn into a mask. So it's just terrible. I should write a science fiction story about that sometime.
Let's go, Brandon. Again, she's throwing it. He says, all you need to do is pick up a cocktail glass and the book sales will flow.
I'm a teetotaler. I can pick up a teacup.
Well, he likes to buy drinks for people. That's tomorrow, not tonight. Let's go. We'll get into it.
So today, instead of writing my normal article I write once a week, I just put out a list of titles for future articles and asked, is anybody interested in these? And one of them that got some interest was, do men need women? So
well, we need each other. Really men and women need each other.
It's really going to be an article that's going to end up, trying to debunk the fish and the bicycle thing for women. But part of it was just, noticing how much happier the men seemed to be when these little things that I didn't have any trouble doing got done. It brought me joy.
Without women, men would live like in caves, like bears with furniture. Okay.
And we'd be lonely.
We would have rocks for furniture, right? No, you're right. Well, men live longer. Married men live longer. I mean, and that's it's a quality. But I think that men and women need each other. It's a mistake to either one or deny.
A wise voice I once heard said that it was not good for man to be alone. I'm not sure who said that. It might have been the.
It's one of the first things ever said.
It's the only thing that was. It's the first thing was said that was not to be good. By the way,
yeah.
So. See, Brandon, he's sharpening. You see, I challenged him before, and he actually beat me in a drinking stream once. So. I had him up to 6 drinks. I had him on the ropes, but number 7 put me under. Yeah, he got me once, and that last one was what put me over. But we'll see.
I heard from the Virgin Mary that when she said they have no wine, it was because Lesgo Brandon had been there and sucked it all up. So thanks a lot, Les.
Well,
it's your fault.
I will reveal. I can reveal this because Brandon's a buddy. Is that he is a good, faithful Catholic, and people.
Excellent. That's. I hope he will forgive me my blasphemous joke. I do love the name. That is a great name.
Well,
anyway, thank you so much.
It's wonderful, and I will put all your links in the description. The great, and I say that very, very rarely, but the great John C. Wright and the wonderful.
He means great girth. He means great in
great in girth.
Right, great in girth.
Limited volume in many ways. Yes. So thank you. We'll do it again soon. God bless you, and
God bless you. Okay, I'm gonna hit leave the studio and say farewell.
Bye.
Bye.
Mom. How cool was that? All right, so that was the great John C. Wright. He's a little humble, not really, but and his wife. And you can see they have lots of good fantasy, and that was kind of a productive. It inspires me a little bit. Maybe I'll do a little more writing on my fantasy novel. And tomorrow we're going to talk all about. So we're going to be partying tomorrow. I've got a lot scheduled and a lot of stuff to do between now and then. But the news is out, so I will tell you, my guests at the end, that I will be moving to Miami, Florida, in June, end of June. And so we'll talk about that. I'll tell you all about it. Tomorrow night, we'll have a party. We'll drink to the future, and all will be revealed. And so I look forward to seeing you tomorrow night. Wasn't that great, Yellow, Orange, Red? I agree. I mean, you guys, and you thank you for the chat, for asking some good questions. And then, yeah, and these people are real science fiction fantasy writers. I'm just a hack. Look at all. See, I'm packing up my CDs. I've got, see this stack here, my CDs. I've got 4 more stacks like that to pack up. Those are my audio CDs. So you'll see the wall growing here and stuff. So anyway, so tomorrow, 8 p.m. Wednesday night, and God bless you. Now I think we're going to redirect to Aussie Overlord. So go say Sagazni Raid. All right. God bless you. See you tomorrow night.